Well, hello, my dear friends. Justyn Smith here, and I want to thank you so much for click and play. It truly is a blessed day to be able to gather together and open up God's holy word and seek His face. Today we are learning lots about Jesus and His example. Jesus' example of serving right here in John 13. Let's read a few verses before we get into the message today. The beginning of the chapter, it says, "Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that His hour was come, that He should depart out of this world unto the Father, having loved His own which were in the world, He loved them unto the end." Now we're thankful for the love that Christ had to those in this world, loving them to the end, but He's about to display to them how they are to act and react from here. In verse 2, the supper being ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray Him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into His hands, and that He was come from God and went to God, and this is where we pause for a second before we give the first point, to recognize that everything is about to shift. Everything is on a hinge moment now as they are gathered at this supper. And as they're gathered at this supper, there have been lots of things that have transpired. Ultimately, we recognize a couple things, and that is the recognizing of what is coming as Christ is looking to His death and burial. And then also to recognize that He knows and understands what the devil has put into the heart of Judas Iscariot to betray Jesus Christ. And think about it. This is somebody who's walked with Jesus, talked with Jesus, carried the bag, the money for Jesus. This is somebody who is right there with Him, joking around, having a good time, enjoying the joys of life, and also wading through the sorrows of things that they would face. And yet through all of this, Jesus is about to give a pure example of what it means to be a servant to others and challenge people to truly serve. This is Jesus' example of serving. Point 1, prepare to serve like Jesus. Prepare to serve like Jesus. Notice how He does it in verse 4. He riseth from supper, laid aside his garments, took a towel, and girded himself. When it comes to service, there are many different forms of serving. This specific area and opportunity is wonderful because it shows He needed to lay aside his garment, roll up his sleeves, if you will, take off the outer garment, take to himself a towel because he's about to deal with washing and water, and gird himself with that towel, and get ready to serve to the capacity that he has opportunity to serve. The first person I ever remember hearing this next statement from is Mike Ragland, an evangelist and director of Living Waters Youth Camp in Alabama. Now, he said, "A need seen is an assignment given." And since then, I have heard various forms of that particular quote, all pointing out the same thing. And maybe even the one that I originally heard it from, maybe he says it a little bit differently now with different choice words. But the idea is the same. You see, like for instance, that piece of trash on the ground, you have the opportunity to pick it up and throw it away. A need seen is an assignment given. And that is showing that you are willing to humble yourself to the act of service and doing what is necessary to get the job done. Jesus is about to set forth a great example of serving. He takes the outer garment off. He takes to himself a towel. He girds himself, preparing for service. Then he picks up a basin of water, and he's about to wash the disciples' feet. So that brings us to point 2. Proceed to serve like Jesus. So we prepare to serve, then we need to proceed in that service just like Jesus. Letter A, I'd like to point out, just do what is before you to do. It says in verse 5, "After that he poureth water into a basin, and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel wherewith he was girded." He just did what was before him to do. So maybe your job is cleaning the restrooms at the church. That's an opportunity to serve like Jesus, doing what it is that you need to do for the glory of God on the behalf of others. Now, I'd also like to note a couple things. Note a couple disciples Jesus would serve. Note a couple disciples that Jesus would serve. In this particular understanding of Jesus' example and service, we see that Judas Iscariot is one that Jesus would serve. Peter is another that Jesus would serve, and we're going to read a couple verses about that. And then there were others, like James and John, all of these that have had different opportunities to serve and will have opportunities to respond or serve. They get to see from firsthand understanding and impact how to truly serve others and serve God in this life. So again, we know a couple disciples Jesus would serve. First of all, I want you to see Simon. Then cometh he to Simon Peter. And Peter saith unto him, Lord, dost thou wash my feet? Jesus answered and said unto him, What I do thou knowest not now, but thou shalt know hereafter. And of course, Jesus is referencing his death, burial, and resurrection, as well as what is going to come with Pentecost and the preaching and those things to come, where Jesus is going to, point out right now things that are going to happen later that Peter is going to understand, and it's going to be clear one day. But in verse 8, Peter saith unto him, Thou shalt never wash my feet. Of course, Peter didn't clearly understand what Jesus was talking about at this point. Jesus answered him, If I wash thee not, thou hast no part with me. And at that moment, Peter's like, wait a second. Okay, here we go. Verse 9, Simon Peter saith unto him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. It's like, wash me every whit, Lord. Just take care of me. Just clean me up. This is exactly what I need. I was speaking against it. And so many times we find Peter sticking his foot in his mouth and kind of recanting or going back to maybe what he should have said in the first place. And this reminds us of us, right? But as we consider the example of Christ, the opportunity to serve, Jesus proceeds. He does what's before him, but he's willing to serve somebody who is actually going to deny him. And he knows it. I mean, he's already told Peter, you're going to deny me 3 different times before the cock crows. But yet Jesus would serve him. He would serve a denier. Jesus would serve somebody who would stick his foot in his mouth over and over again. And this causes us to realize with the example of Christ that if Christ is willing to serve somebody who sticks his foot in his mouth over and over again and says things he should not say, who's very quick to say what he's thinking instead of thinking it over first or hearing clearly what Jesus has to say or kind of searching it out, we find out that we should serve people like that too. And another type of person that we need to serve is even that hard person that we know is against us. For exactly, Jesus' service serves that type of person. Jesus saith unto him, He that is washed needeth not to wash his feet, but is clean every whit, and ye are clean, but not all, referring to Judas, for he knew who should betray him. Therefore, said he, ye are not all clean. He's referring to Judas Iscariot, the one who would betray him, the one whom the devil had put in his heart to betray Jesus, and it would be with a kiss for silver. Man, I'm telling you, Jesus sets forth a tremendous example of serving others with what he has in that very moment and the opportunity he has in that time to serve them. You can't always be serving everyone in every way, but with the ways that he gives you, you serve, and you're faithful, and you're right there. Number 3, there's the proclamation and presence of the servant. So Jesus is about to give an announcement, a proclamation with a question, and then his presence is going to preach some things. I mean, the very fact that he is speaking to them, asking them a question, and then showing them is a teachable moment in their lives, considering the example of Christ serving others. Likewise, we should serve others. Notice the proclamation and presence. So after he had washed their feet and had taken his garments, okay, so he gets back into how he was before and was set down again, he said unto them, Know ye what I have done to you? Okay, so it's not just, wow, okay, That was interesting. It's not just Peter's like, okay, wash me everywhere, you know. It's not just that he washed Judas Iscariot, but he's like, do you know what I have done to you? And Jesus is about to drive a point home in proclamation, answering this question. So we have to suppose that the disciples aren't saying anything. They're kind of thinking it. And maybe after Peter's response, they're wise to just sit there and think and wait for Jesus to answer. I don't know exactly how it went out, but this is how we seem, or how it seems to have gone down. As Christ asked the question, know ye what I have done to you? Here's how Christ answers it with his proclamation and presence. Ye call me Master and Lord, and ye say, well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, ye also ought to wash one another's feet. So what he is saying, guys, is he is saying, you call me Lord. You do well to call me Lord. The authority, that reverential position, okay, that respect that is given in a title, in what you call me and how you respond to me. But do you see what I've just done to you? I lowered myself to serve. I humbled myself to serve. I was willing to take off my outer garments, take a towel, fill a basin with water, and go around to each of you and serve you. And that shows a true picture of servant leadership. Not just driving people in the direction you want them to go, but also being willing to serve others as you would like to be served. And maybe as you deserve it in a position, but you are willing to serve one another. Then he says in his proclamation, and therefore his presence as a servant, I have given you an example, that ye should do as I have done to you. This is very clear, isn't it? Jesus' example of service, an opportunity to lower yourself and serve, even if you have position, to serve God, to serve others. And so as you look at those that you have around you, there's obvious need for delegation from authority and leadership, but there needs to be a serving one another type of mentality. How can I serve you today? How can I pray with you today? How can I show you the love of God today? How can I minister to you today? Are there things that you need that I can do for you that you can't do for yourself? Now, I also realize and want to throw in this plug that if we always do everything for a person, they'll never be able to care for themselves, or maybe never choose to. It's kind of like that old illustration of give a man a fish, you'll feed him for a day, but teach a man a fish and he'll eat for the rest of his life. When you not just do everything for everyone at all times, but you also exercise the wisdom and being able to train somebody to serve as well, not only will they be able to care for themselves, but they'll also be able to care for others and truly show a good picture of the example of Christ that we would do as Christ did to his disciples, that we would be willing to lower ourselves and serve instead of having that high mind that says, serve me, I'm the best, care for me. No, that's not what Christ has called us to. Christ has called us to look across the body of believers and serve them, to do well to all men, especially to those of the household of the faith. We are to follow the example of Christ. In fact, look at verse 16. Verily, verily, I say unto you, the servant is not greater than his Lord, neither he that is sent greater than he that sent them. Then he concludes with, if ye know these things, happy are ye if ye do them. And I'm going to leave that verse up there for just a second, because we're talking about Jesus' example of serving. And it ends with this, if ye know these things, happy are ye if ye do them. It does not say you're happy if ye know these things. It says you're happy if ye do these things that you know. And so you can hear what you need to do. You can know what you need to do, but you're not truly going to be happy until you do the very things that Jesus Christ set forth as an example. Have you ever learned the joy of serving? And as we close this broadcast talking about Jesus' example of serving, Jesus is about to go into the greatest example, not just at the supper, but the greatest example of giving his life for all men at the cross, humbly, sacrificially, willingly, for the glory of God. Do you know the joy of serving, humbling yourself, willingly, sacrificially, giving of yourself? Not that you would be exalted, but that you would honor the Word of God and honor others in this life, asking nothing in return, willing just to do it, because what a wonderful privilege it is to serve as Christ served. So maybe today you'd be challenged to do just that, serve as Christ has served. What an example is he? My friends, I want to thank you so much for listening to today's broadcast. It's a blessing to have you here with us. If you have not liked a video in a while, it would be a blessing to us if you do so. If you're not a subscriber yet, go ahead and click that subscribe button, and you can be notified when we upload our next video. It truly is a blessing to be able to go through the book of John with you, and we trust that you'll join us next time. Have a blessed day. Thank you for clicking play.